Hello everyone, welcome to another Inkarnate live stream. My name is Mati and today I'm going to be showing you how to annotate your maps. So basically we're going to be covering how to label just about every aspect of your map, from biomes, landmasses, bodies of water, mountains, forests, points of interest, inserts, titles, you name it, the works. So we're going to cover all of that today, so make sure you stick around to catch it all. Now I just only have just a quick couple of announcements that I want to do. If you go click that bell at the top right here, see what's new, and you'll notice a couple things. We just started Maptober. Today is the 5th, and that today's prompt is roadmap, and I've incorporated that in today's stream. So you're going to want to go ahead and check that out. You know, doing these map prompts is really helpful to challenge you and become more creative. So definitely participate. You'd be surprised what you come up with. So go check that out. Maptober is really exciting. We also have some new Halloween special seasonal art. Go check that out. And for those of you who might have either feature requests or art requests, we've went ahead and changed that. We're no longer doing art and feature requests on our Discord. We now have separate links for those. Those will be provided in the chat. So click those links if you have any art or feature requests. So click those links. All right, well, let's not waste time. Let's jump in. You're going to need the link to this map if you want to follow along. Of course, you don't have to clone to this map to follow along. You can open up one of your own maps and you can apply what we're learning in this stream to your map, if that makes it easier for you. So let's just go ahead and open this map up and we'll get it started. Now, map annotation, I've kind of noticed, is kind of confusing at first when there's so many options with text and all this stuff. Sometimes it's kind of hard to know what exactly you want to do with map annotation. And let's just go and start with kind of like the first thing that I think of whenever I have a completed map. Labels, you know, you kind of label throughout the process, but at the very end, that's when I do my final label sweep and I kind of figure out what things I want to label, what things I want to annotate. Do I want to have a title? Do I want to have a legend? And a lot of that will be determined on just the negative space in your map that you have to work with. And so one of the first things that I think about is a map title. And a map title is extremely important because this is the title of your baby, right? This is the title of your world, the hours that you've been just toiling trying to build this world. So you really want to have a map title that kind of pops a little bit. So the basic map title that you can really create, this is the easiest one, is to just use your basic text, and you can make it big if you want. Sometimes I like to tack in the world of, and a really nice trick is to use varying text size. So the world of can be a small piece of text like this, while I can put in a second piece of text, which is like the name of the world. You know, we can call it whatever you want, googly guck, whatever title you might come up with. And then you just have the title of the world be bigger than the part that says the world of. So it's kind of like one labeling trick, one text trick that I use is to have the title of the map be really big text, while the smaller text, whatever it might be, maybe you might not have that. You might just call it googly guck instead of, the world of googly guck. But one trick is to use varying text sizes so it looks kind of interesting. And when you're thinking about where to place your map title, that really is determined about the negative space. So like on this map, you'll notice that there's a lot of negative space at the top here. So it's a good place to put that. Hello, first time chatter, Kentley72. Hi, welcome. The negative space is generally where you want to put your titles, whether it's here. See, there's some negative space here, negative space here. This is the most basic kind of labeling that you could do for a title. Let's just throw in some text. Now, if you want to have something that's a little bit more detailed for your title, you can make a graphic for that. So look carefully. I'll go ahead and zoom into this graphic here. And you've noticed that I've added in some stamps. I've decorated it. And one of the things about your title, if you want to add in graphics, is to include something from your map that sticks out. So if you look carefully, what I did is I first used this legend right here as kind of a plate or a backdrop in which my text will be placed, including a graphics or whatever I'm using. So having like a main backdrop first, like this legend, is a good start. From there, I went ahead and just used text. And notice that text trick that I mentioned earlier, where there's smaller words like the and to. I made that smaller text. And then I took the liberty of taking one text, the R, and just made it really, really big, because that's the first letter. And then I used OAD, the other part of the road. So that way you kind of create this kind of interesting effects with text. Don't just use the same text. Let me give you an example. If I had used this same title with all the same text size, see what it looks like. The Road to Winter Spire. And you kind of notice that since the text is all the same size, it kind of looks not very interesting, right? It's not very intriguing. So definitely change up your text size so that way you can add a little bit more character, a little bit more dimension to your title. Now, as for the graphics in the title, I went ahead and the map is called The Road to Winterspire. And of course, today's map prompt for Maptober is the road. So I, in kind, decided to make a map that does that. So the map title is indicative to two important things on this map, and it should be important to your maps as well, depending on what you're trying to convey. For me, the Road to Winterspire. So there's a road right here, and you can see it's really predominant. It sticks out quite a bit until it gets into the snow region, right? So the road is the first part. So I've made that important in the title. And then also Winterspire, which is the end of the destination right here. And so I've went ahead and made sure to make a graphic that has Winterspire in it. So let me zoom in, and you'll notice that I use these flat fantasy world stamps, and these work really well with graphic titles because they're flat, right? And they work really well with that flat legend right there. So I used this graphic to create the spire. Now, when it comes to your map, just think about what's important on your map. Is it a certain city, a capital? Is it a sea creature, a monster? Whatever it is, the most important elements in your map will really determine on the stamps that you want to decorate your title with. So that's really the trick, is just figure out what graphics you want to put, what are most important on your map, and then you can apply that to your title. So that explains a little bit about titles. Let's go with that next step. What next do we want to label on our map? The next one is going to be bodies of water. Sometimes it's difficult to decide how exactly you want to label your bodies of water. You see we have a decent sized sea or ocean here. We've got a little bit of an inlet here. Maybe these could be a series of bays here. And of course, there's a river right here, and that looks kind of nice. So why don't we go ahead and check out how is it that you can label your bodies of water. And there's a lot of different ways to go about it. I'll show you the simplest one. So I'm just going to go to bodies of water and turn on this group right here, and you'll notice that I've got some text here. Now, when it comes to ocean, white text to me works the best. And the reason why is because white is a neutral color, and it works with either really, really dark textures or really, really light textures. So if I take this dark texture right here and put it over frigid, it still makes that text still pops out even though it's dark. But what happens if I take a lighter texture? Even with a lighter texture, the white still pops out. So white is a great color for your text when it comes to annotating your bodies of water, because it just works so well. You could be a dark green, it could be a dark blue, whatever color your ocean is, white text generally works the best. And I've dropped the opacity as well. The other thing about labeling large bodies of water, notice this frigid sea right here, is that I've tried to make it span much of that area that is the ocean, right? So I've taken the word frigid right here, and I've kind of labeled it in a way where it takes up the mass of the body of water. And I've even offsetted sea a little bit, so that way it kind of looks like, hey, I'm labeling the whole ocean, frigid sea. So just doing two words, frigid and sea, place one somewhere on your ocean, and then place the sea part or ocean part a little somewhere else. So you really want the labels to show the whole area that is the frigid sea. That whole area is the frigid sea. Now, what about labeling things like rivers and stuff? How is it that I label a river and then it looks decent? One of the first things I do is once I've created the river, I use a path to kind of create the curve that I want. Once I've created the curve, I'll start taking individual names that are in the river. So if the river is just one word or two words, Vallon River or Vallon-Gale River, I'll make each word and then I'll curve it to the path guide that I've used. And then the next step is you want to make sure that it spans most of the ocean, most of the river. And the way that you go about doing that is doing your spacing. So when you're doing text like this, and I'm just going to go ahead and type in something, whatever it might be, choose your spacing like this, and this will cause it to span out, and this allows it to cover more area of your river. So always remember to use spacing. It will really, really help to cover it. And then you can change your curve as you go with each letter along the curved path guide that you've created. Hello, first time chatter, Dragon at Rest. Glad that you are here. Hey, Justice RFA, glad that you're with us. So pretty simple stuff when it comes to labeling a river. You just need to create a guide path and then individual names of the river, if it's 3 words or 4 words or whatever it might be, and then just individual curve those to that guide that you've created. So it's so much easier to put together. And you'll notice here that I've also didn't use any curvature at all. The ice maw up here, go ahead and I'll show that. So here's some bays right here, the ice maw, the frost deep bay. There's a gullet here with some curved text here. I've just kind of added that in because I like the way the curve works. And of course, there's an inlet here, which I've labeled. So just remember the highlights here. When you're doing your labeling on your bodies of water, white works very, very well. And with no outline, by the way. There's no need to use a black outline. You kind of want the text to almost get lost in the ocean. You don't want it to be so bright, 100% opacity white, because then that contrast kind of distracts. So you do want to drop the opacity and turn off any kind of outline. At least that works for me, okay? Let's go ahead and move on to the next thing that we're going to annotate here. Let me go ahead and just delete my stuff here. I'm going to go ahead and just turn off my bodies of water. And we're going to go ahead and touch base on how to do some terrain stuff. So what happens if you want to label entire regions of your map? Like, let's just annotate, say this is one region right here, right? There's another region right here, this kind of desert region. And then there's this kind of plains region right here. And this kind of like, I don't know, lava-like mountains. And of course, this region up here. How would you go about labeling those regions? Because sometimes it's confusing, right? So how would we go about doing that? And there's like a whole bunch of ways that you can actually label your regions. One of them is with text, right? And of course, the most simplest way is just black and white text, and then just plop it down right on top. You know, that's about as simple as that gets. You can just put some text down with the black and white. That's just right out of the hat, the default settings. You can just throw down some text. That works just fine. But what happens if there's not much? What happens if your map is really kind of populated and you don't want that text covering up that region, right? Well, let's just say that you are going to use text. Let's say that you want to do something outside of the black and white default text, right? What happens if we wanted to perhaps use color coding to do it? Color coding works really, really well. So I'm going to zoom in and you can see that by each region I've included in text. And I'm following that basic rule of making sure that the text takes up the majority of the region. And I've used color coding. So you've got blue for this snow, like Arctic region. I've used a green text, and you'll notice that I've used an outline color as well, a black outline, so that way, if there is a similar color, a similar green or yellow texture, that black outline will make sure that that text pops out. Hey, Woey! First time chatter, glad that you are here. Love your work, by the way. So notice that I'm putting the text down on each area. Fireside Vale, that represents that region. So you can color code regions if you wish. That's entirely up to you. And there's a lot of annotation that you can do. You can also use the path tool to annotate if you wish. Let me go ahead and throw up this path tool annotation. And you'll notice that I've used the path tool to actually annotate each region, color-coded it. So that's one way. Another way, if you don't have to use text. We can delete that color text if you want. I'm just go ahead and drop the opacity back down. So you don't have to use text. So this way you're avoiding covering up any of your points of interest, covering up any of your world, any of the art that you've created, right? So using paths is a great way to annotate a region. And you'll notice that I've even created a little legend with it. Again, that legend stamp in Fantasy World works great, and I've annotated it to where you have each label of each region. So this way you don't have to put text in your region at all. You can just use the path tool. Really, it's up to you what's most important to be labeled. You as a DM need to figure out, or as a world builder, need to think about what's the most important thing to annotate. One thing you don't want to do is over annotate, because too much annotation on a map begins to crowd the map with too much text and inserts and all this stuff. So it's super important to make sure to figure out what are the most important things that need to be annotated. And the way to decide that really is what is the most immediate and most important things to your players, the region that you're in, all those things. Because you might not want to annotate everything on the map. You might only do certain regions, maybe the starting region on your world map where your players are going to start, because you're thinking of like a fog of war. Only your players can see certain regions. So really just think about these kind of things when it comes to annotating. Now, there are other ways of also annotating regions. If it's a political type of situation where these maps have some political stuff, you can throw in heraldic symbols to kind of represent each region. So you'll notice here that each region also has a heraldic symbol here. I didn't throw on any particular symbol onto the shield, so it's just basic, but it's one way that you can show that there is some kind of political leaning, some kind of faction, whether it's a house, a noble house, whether it's some kind of democratic state, whether it's a whatever it might be. So this way you can include some kind of politics into your maps, and you can of course throw in your own heraldry symbols onto those shields. So very helpful to also annotate that way. Instead of having to label any of the POIs on your map, you can just label regions and just do it that way with shields, paths, or text. It's whichever way that you want to go about it. It's really up to you, okay? All right, let's go ahead and turn off. I'm going to go ahead and turn off some of these things that I don't need anymore. So I will turn off my bodies of water, my color text region, and I will turn off my path annotation. And we'll go ahead and move on to the next section. I hope that helped with regions. We'll go ahead and move on to how to do certain terrain and miscellaneous items as well. So we'll get to that. Let me just go ahead and turn off this other annotation we no longer need. All right, there you go. Let's go ahead and talk about how to do certain terrain elements, because sometimes labeling terrain can be extremely difficult. So some important things are like how to label a mountain and how to label a forest. Forests can be extremely difficult because sometimes it's hard to get the text to work right with the trees. So there's a technique that I've developed that you can use that's really, really helpful. And the first step is just to apply your text first. Just apply your text to get it, position it where you want it, curve it, add the white shadow, black text. Remember, black and white are neutral colors, so they work really well. I've added a harsh white shadow to make it look like the black is popping up. So whatever texture is below, it won't interfere with the black text because of that white shadow. Once you've built in the text, you can use a path if you want to kind of represent the overall shape of the forest. And then once you've done that, you can go in and just take your trees and just start going around the text. Start going around the text. So, and that way the text frames or not the text, but the trees will frame the label. That's really, to me, the best way to label forests. It's just one way, but there are a lot of different ways. But this way I found to be the most efficient, and it looks fairly nice. It will work on just about any map. The next one is how to label mountains. Now, labeling mountains is a little bit more difficult because no matter what text you put down, even white text onto the mountain, it looks kind of odd. So one thing that you can do is, just like before, put down your text first, set the curvature, the color, everything that you want, and then just take a series of clipping masks and put it underneath the text. So what I did is I took a series of clipping masks and made a bead with them, and then that way none of the line work underneath of those mountains got in the way of the text. So the text is unobstructed by the line work. So that's all that I did. Simple as that, is I just took a couple of clipping masks, one with the soft edges, not the hard edge, the soft edge, and I beaded them together right underneath the edgy mountain label, so that way none of the line work will get in the way. So those are the two really important ones, because I notice a lot of people struggle with how to label forests and how to label mountains, because it can be confusing, but that's really the best way. And of course, make sure that you throw in a little bit of curvature in your mountains. Since mountains don't go in a perfectly straight line, you will of course want to curve your text for that whatever mountain range you're putting down. You'd want to do the same thing if you were labeling perhaps this mountain, right? You want to have a little bit of a curve there, right? And of course, make sure that the text spans the majority of the mountain. Notice that the text spans the majority of the mountain, right? Otherwise, part of it might be something else. It might be a different mountain range or something. So make sure that your mountain label spans the majority of the mountain. All right. Pretty easy stuff. And then of course you'll notice that I've also labeled some other things. One thing that you should know about labeling is consistency. So because I've labeled some terrain features like Volcanium, the Pit of Zard, the Yeti Cavern, and Lunar Prime, because I've labeled these, I'm using the exact same settings: black outline, white text. Because if there's not any continuity to your labels, it will confuse the user. Sometimes I see maps with 30 different types of text colors and stuff like that, and that might look good for you, but for users that can be or viewers, it can be very confusing. So stick to certain patterns of text, like label your certain terrain things like caverns, the moon, whatever. Use a certain type of text for certain types of regions, biomes, and stuff like that. So that way there is continuity on your map and it looks nice and uniform. Okay, so always remember to do that when you're working with annotation. So what do we got next? Let's go ahead and put up our isometric POIs. Let me turn off first our terrain group here, and we'll go ahead and move on to that next step. Let's go ahead and put down the POIs. POIs are points of interest. Okay, now I'm going to be using isometric points of interest because much of the art here, this is kind of a stylized map. And so I've went ahead and put down some POIs here. Now there are multiple ways that you can label your POIs. For most people, the out of box is just putting a piece of text, blah, 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 right over it, boom, you're done, right? Now that might not work in every circumstance. Sometimes your map might be too messy and you kind of want something to make your POIs pop out. The way to make your POIs look labeled and popped out is to first kind of add banners. Banners are a great way to label points of interest. All right, notice that I've used these labels right here. Remember I used that trick? I did smaller text for the word the, larger text size for Winter Spear. Right? Remember that trick. So I went ahead and added these banners. Now banners mean that these areas pop out, and because this is just a region map and not a large world map, it's okay to throw down some banners for your most important locations, right? If you have more locations, way more locations, you might not want to use banners or text at all. You might want to go with a different route, and I'll show you how to do that as well. Banners are a great way to label your points of interest. Remember, POI, so Seaside Heights, Lumpton, Now, some tips about labeling your locations on your map. Some people might struggle with it. There's a lot of different ways that you can come up with your own names for things. One thing is that you can always look up words in other languages and change the wording a little bit. English words, you can change the words around. There are generators for names. Whatever it takes, there are a lot of different ways to go about it. Me personally, I know a couple words in other languages, not the whole language themselves, but a couple of those words in those languages. And that really helps to really come up with different and unique and interesting ideas. Don't just use English. Go look up what the French word for water is, or what the German word is for forest. And you can really have a lot of fun by manipulating and changing words from different languages as well as English, all right? So that's going to be very helpful. Now, there are other ways to annotate besides banners. You can also do things with legends and keys, right? So also with legends and keys, they also work really well to hide some of your negative space. If you don't really know what the name of your ocean is, or you need some space to put a key or a legend, the ocean is a great negative space to put that. So again, I'm going to go ahead and just take up my plate, and I'm going to use this plate right here for my own purposes. Let me go ahead and just put that down. Plate, put it up to 100%. These plates work perfect for legends and keys. That's what it's labeled. It's a legend, of course. And let's go ahead and start with one way to annotate POIs without putting a text directly over them. What you can do is you can use letters or numbers to annotate. So I went ahead and just took a simple carpet from Fantasy Battle Maps, rotated it into a diamond, desaturated it, boosted the brightness, and then put a black shadow, and then put some text on top of it. So this is very helpful when you don't want to put text over your beautiful map, right? You don't want text to scar your map. So one thing that you can do is to just use letters or numbers. You'll notice here that I've labeled everything with its number and then put it in the legend right here. So that's another great way to annotate your map without having to put text on your map. So really, really helpful to do that. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off, and we'll go ahead and show some other ways of annotating POIs, because there's a lot of different ways to do it. Let's talk about what happens if you don't, let's say that your map is massive and you don't want to use these isometric symbols, right? Maybe it's a little too stylized. You want something a little better. Maybe you want to put down icons instead. And icons are great if you have like 1,000 points of interest on your map. If you have like 50 points of interest, obviously you don't want to put down all the text. You don't want to put in the legend or key 1 or A to Z. That's a lot. So instead, what you can do is use icons that represent certain things on your map. So let me boost up the icons here, and you'll notice that there's icons on the map. And now you can place as many of these as you want without labeling them because you have a map key. Okay, map keys are very helpful if you have a large map and you don't want to label every single location. This works great too for Fog of War. That way players don't really know what the name of the village is. They'll know it's a town or a keep or a shrine, but they won't know the name of it, right, until they arrive there. Or they find out through maybe some NPC or whatever you as a DM has in mind. So icons are perfect when you have just so much information on the map and you don't want to throw down all that text. So using icons is a way of doing that. So it works perfect. I think icons work great on really large world maps with a lot of different locations. Let's go ahead and turn off the icons, and we'll go ahead and switch back to our ISO because it fits with the overall style. All right, let's talk a little bit about inserts. What is an insert? An insert is something that you insert onto your map that gives you some information. Okay, so let's say, for instance, that I wanted to maybe include a small city map on it right here. So you'll notice right here, I've got this city right here. This is the largest city. See how big it is? It's kind of the biggest icon on the map minus this tower up here at the top, spire, because it's one of the most important things. But maybe you want to show some kind of emphasis on a city. So the way that you can do that is by maybe putting a shield over the capital to represent that it is an important location. So you can do this with any of your capitals if you want. You can put a shield to kind of represent, hey, this is a capital. It's very, very important. Notice also that the plate also has the same heraldry icon. So you notice this icon is here and you see it there as well. This is really helpful to make sure that, hey, what I'm about to create right here is going to be that particular location. So that way it's important. So let's go ahead and throw down the capital insert information. One moment while I put that together. So there's this capital insert I put on this plate right here. So let's say that you just want to show a little bit of the layout of this capital right here. So you've got this layout right here, and this is going to transition into a little bit on tips on how to label your cities, villages, stuff like that. Okay, so one thing with labeling a city is that if you have a lot of locations, it's great to use those little tiny little icons right here. Notice that I just took a random stamp, desaturated it, dropped the contrast and boost up the brightness, and threw down a number or a letter. It's up to you how you want to do it. This is kind of the best way to do a city, especially if you have a lot of locations on your city. If you have a lot of locations, it doesn't make sense to throw down a bunch of text, right? So throwing in a key to the city is a great way of doing that. Now you might want to label some important locations, like maybe your players in the game are trying to reach a keep in the city. Then you might want to throw down some text over some key locations, like maybe the most important temple, the most important whatever. Different ways of labeling your city, okay? So definitely you're going to want to do that. You might also want to consider labeling maybe certain regions of your city. So just like before, just like we used text or a path to label regions, you can do that same thing. You can do that same thing by just putting a path around a certain region and just dropping the opacity and then creating a little legend that say, hey, that red path represents the merchant district. That blue path represents the temple district, the whatever district. So those same regional advice is the same thing that you can do to districts in a city, really. Now, what about labeling roads? Remember the same concept that we did with rivers? Remember when we showed a river, let's just say that you want to label this road right here. What I simply did is I made sure that the text spans the entire road. And remember the trick, just use that spacing. Remember to use that space feature with the text to make sure that text spans the entire road. If the road is curved, just like that river was down here, just do that same thing. Create the curve guide, and then each individual word, like if it's the king's cobble, then put the king and cobble as 3 different words, and then span them throughout the entire road so that they cover it. So it's the exact same advice with the river as it is with roads, so that way, and you don't have to label every single road in your city. What's most important is to actually only label the main routes that are the most important to you. This happens a lot with world builders as they get overwhelmed with so many things that they want to label. You as a DM, give yourself less work. You only have to label the most important locations. You don't have to label every single thing. If you want to label it for yourself, that's fine. But for your players, they don't need to know the name of every single thing. So do yourself a favor and only label the most important things on your map. That way it's less work for you. You don't have to come up with every single name for every single district, unless you like that. If you're a detail freak like most world builders, then that's okay. But if you feel like you're on a tight time frame, just label what's most important to your players, okay? Yes, absolutely. So often less is more. Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Jeremy. Absolutely. All right, so yeah, so that is basically how you would label a city. Now, there are other inserts that you can also include. Let me go ahead and turn off this and show you another. Inserts can also be, can contain some backstory, some history, right? So let me throw in another one here. Let me throw in a Winter Spire insert. And so sometimes an insert can give you information about certain locations on the map. So because Winter Spire is the end goal of the map, maybe we should give some information about the spire, right? Because you're wondering, well, why on earth am I trying to get to Winter Spire? So I've kind of used the same icon that I used to create here. And all I did was just group the whole thing. And then I just moved that, rotated it, and resized it, and used it as a graphic on the side of my plate here. And to make it kind of match, I used this gray frame right here to make sure that that gray fits with this gray right here. So I'm throwing in a little, thinking about color scheme, right? So right here, Winter Spire, the history of it, maybe the lord of that spire, maybe what the Lord has in mind. So all the different things that you can do. So it's always nice to throw in an insert if you have room for the insert, of course. Sometimes you might not have room for an insert, and that's okay. But if you just keep, you can always just use the resize feature to resize your map to make it a little bit bigger so that you can create some negative space to fit an insert, okay? Inserts are really easy to make. You can just use a legend and then put whatever text or stamps you want on top of it. You can also throw down clipping masks and put it on top of the legend, so that way you can paint whatever it is you want. Maybe you want to create a scene on the legend, throw down a clipping mask right on top, and then you can paint that scene with textures and with stamps. So lots of different ways that you can go about annotating things. Now I'm just going to do one more thing that I like to do with annotating a map, and it's useful for you as a DM, maybe not so much as an element to the map. So I'll go ahead and turn off this annotation right here, and I'll mention one last piece of annotation, and I'll go ahead and mention, and I'll go ahead and answer a couple questions that are specific to map annotation. I won't be taking any questions concerning your account. Will you be adding this art? Will you be adding this feature? Please don't ask those questions. Already mentioned earlier in the stream, if you have art requests, feature requests, click the links at the top of the chat. That's where we do our requests. Make sure that it's whatever questions you have, they're specific to map annotation or this map in general. If you want to know how I did something on this map, that's fine. You can ask those questions. So the last thing that I want to mention on map annotation is that you can do some fun things, not just for yourself, but for your players. It's up to you. And that is that sometimes you can annotate things like travel by a boat, for instance. So let's say that your players are, let's just say that you want to remember how many days it takes to go by ship from one POI to the other. You can totally put down your ship wherever you want. It's just representing the ship where it is, or just showing it on the line, and then using the paths to kind of create this shipping lane or a sailing lane, whichever you want to call it. And then you can put down some text to show how many days it is, 3 days, 7 days, whatever you want. This is helpful for you as a DM. You can also do it on your roads to show how many days it is to reach a certain location. A lot of people on maps, DMs, are like, well, it needs to be exactly 3 days from this POI to this because this, and this needs to happen. Sometimes it's best to annotate those distant timed travel distance so that way it's for yourself. You can also throw it in as well for your players if you want. Sometimes it just looks interesting. It's really up to you. Yeah, absolutely, Jeremy. Putting a white outline putting a white shadow on the back allows the POI to pop out, and it works overall with the road color because it's so white. So some color continuity here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn off the ship annotation now, and we can go ahead and discuss some questions that you might have. I tried to cover as much as possible. If there's something that with annotation that I did not cover and that you might have a question about, feel free to ask and we'll go ahead and answer those. So I'm just going to go first come, first serve for any questions that people have. Don't be shy. Ask any questions that you have about annotation. Again, don't ask questions about accounts and stuff like that. Go to our built-in support. So I'll let questions roll in. And of course, if you're looking for this map, you can totally download this map for yourself. It's clonable, editable. The link to that map is in the chat. It's at the top. Go look for that. And you can do whatever you want with this map. Everything here, all of these groups are all on this map. So you can experiment, play with things. It's all there. All right, so go ahead and ask any questions that you might have. All right, first question was on the bodies of water. Did you use one text box on the ocean or separate them out? You can do both if you want. Let me just show you how I would go about doing it. There are actually several ways of going about it. It's really up to you if you want to make it easier for yourself or not. The way that I did it on the map in particular was I did it this way. So let me just show you. I went with frigid like this, and then all I did was just go several spaces up, then typed in C. I'm going to show you something very interesting too about text, because if you're going to be annotating text, you're going to be doing a lot of text. One secret about the text box that's going to be really helpful to you is that you can absolutely change the size of the text field by just dropping it down. So if you have this large text, then you can fit it in like this. So let me just real quickly do this real quick, and I'll show you what I did. Let's go right there, and all I did was just do a couple spaces to offset. And then I just brought it down like that. But if you don't want to do that, because that is a little bit of work, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're doing all this weird stuff, you don't have to do that. You could just do two separate words, frigid and then C, and that way you're a little bit more precise on where they are. Really up to you which way you want to do it. Whichever one is really the easiest for you. I hope that answered the question. Feel free, anyone has any questions? Oh, no problem, always glad to help. Feel free, throw me your questions. I am here to help. Map annotation is actually a little bit more interesting than you think. It's not as simple as just throwing down some text, right? It's a lot of fun, different things that you can really do with map annotation. I'll go ahead and let the questions roll in. Again, you can also ask questions about whatever's on this map as well. That's fine, that does pertain to this stream. All right, let me just take a look here. If there aren't any questions, that's okay. I understand. I'll give it just a few more moments, and then I'm just going to go over the stream calendar for this month so that you all know what's going to be coming up next. So I'll just wait a few more moments for those questions to roll in. Ooh, another question. No problems. Great. Awesome. My second question was about the route annotation for the ship. I love that. If it was in space on a black background, do you think white is the best option, or found a different blend like you did with the sea? So when it comes to like annotating like a ship or a vessel on a map, the way that if you're going to have like a lot of ships, are you planning on having a ton of shipping lanes for your ships with different factions, or is it just going to be one ship? It's really up to you. If it's going to be multiple ships with multiple factions, you might want to change up the colors. Like you might want to have a green shipping lane for this species and their ships. You might want a red one for this species. So that's one way to go about it. If it's just a single ship, then you could just use white text. Probably white will work well. Just drop the opacity so it's not super bright white, because black will absolutely be super contrast against white. So you noticed right here that I dropped the opacity on this path right here with the square little dots on it, those dashes. Drop the opacity a little bit, because if it's pure bright white, then it will kind of pop out, and it might not even be a good way for it to pop out. So definitely a lot of lanes, a lot of factions, a lot of colors. Just one faction, one ship with one shipping lane. Just use plain old white. Probably works just fine. Any advice for beginners who are looking to start? That is a specific question. It's not particular to this map, but I can tell you that a good start is to join our Discord. And we'll go ahead and throw that Discord link. On our Discord, we have people called mentors, and mentors are the kind of people you want to talk to if you're absolutely fresh to Inkarnate. If you're a greenhorn and you're just brand new to it, go ahead and join. Make sure to pick the Inkarnator role in the roles channel so you can see all the channels in our server. And then just ping a mentor, or you can go to map feedback, and trust me, that's where you're going to get all the help that you need. You can also subscribe. You can also follow my profile on Inkarnate, because I have so many different guides. So all those guides will be extremely helpful, because I'm basically touching base on a lot of beginner subjects. So that will be very, very, very helpful. I'm not the only one who makes guides. We do have a specific guide or tutorial and guide channel. Jeremy even has some good guides on there as well. He does videos, some great freaking videos. Definitely check those out. Just go to the Discord, check out the tutorials and guides channel. Totally helpful. You can also go to our YouTube channel. Every single stream we do, it gets recorded and added to YouTube, and it usually gets added within 3 or 4 hours after the stream. It takes a little while to upload. So definitely check out all of those resources. And of course, you can always ping me personally on Discord if you want. I'm always glad to help. That's what these streams are all about, is to help you to really spruce up your skills and become a better cartographer. That's what it's all about. All right, let's go ahead and see if there's any other questions that people might have. I'm stumped on making a parchment. Where would I start or how? Yeah, that's a question that definitely you want to go to our Discord for, because Discord is the place to go to talk to mentors who are really going to help you out. Is there any other questions people have about this particular map or annotation? Feel free to ask. We still have a lot of time, 15 minutes until the end of the stream. Yep, and there is a full editor demo that will go over everything, as well as a parchment map demo. Thank you, Becca, by the way. Appreciate it. All right, super exciting. Yeah, I mean, really, map annotation is really just about experimentation, as it is with all art forms. Experimentation, trying new things, and just having fun with it, right? Sometimes what I like to do is, sometimes I'll spend like an hour just trying to figure out how I want to annotate my map. I might want to think up a series of inserts, or maybe come up with a crazy map title that looks interesting. There's so many different ways to go about doing it. Oh, got a question here. How do you decide to do dot POIs or little towns for POIs? How do you decide? The way that I decide that, and I mentioned this earlier, but I'll mention it again because it is really important, is that if you have a massive, absolutely massive map, and you've got like 1,000+ POIs, because you as a world builder just took the time to craft all these different places, the best time to use an icon is when you have a lot of locations and there's not enough space to make a legend that's going to have a gazillion, bazillion, a zillion different locations to fit on that. So instead of using a legend or a key, or labeling, instead of just labeling each individual location, putting down an icon and then creating a key with what each icon is the most helpful. So how I decide really just depends on how large the map is, one, and two, it depends on, whether you're a map, whether you're a private contractor and your client wants POIs, whether your client wants exaggerated isometric POIs, whatever it is they want. So really what we're really determining is just what the use case scenario is. Are you making it for a client? They should decide. Is it your own map for your own campaign as a DM? Totally up to you. For me, scale and size play the huge role whether I want to use icons. I hope that answered your question. How are the roads white? Would you mind showing how you picked? How do I do my roads? So the way that I did the roads, I'll zoom in real close so you can see it, is I actually used watercolor cities texture. A watercolor cities texture, this one right here. And it's the road texture, and I just brought the scale way down. I dropped the opacity, and I think it's a pretty good texture, because it does have a little bit of road in it. This is a stylized map. In reality, you wouldn't even be able to see individual stones within the road. So this is highly stylized. And the way that I created this illusion of kind of depth, like there's a little bit of a lip or a bevel on the road, was I just took a brown path and I set it to blur, and I just put it along the edge. And the way that I decided where that was going to be was pretty simple. Because you are facing, when you're thinking about dimension, I only made sure that the faces that are facing towards me are going to have that black path, Obviously, because this face of this ridge right here is not going to be seen to the eye, you don't need to put that path there. So that's why I put a path here, along here, right where it stopped. I put it on the other side. It's the face that is facing you that you want to put that little path there to create this illusion of depth. So it looks like the road is kind of built in, kind of going into the landscape a little bit. That's how I did that trick. And you don't have to use paths. You can use a texture if you want. I find paths to be easier because if I don't like the way it looks, I can delete it. If I don't like the color that I use, the blur, whatever those things are, whenever I look at that, I can just change a path because it's editable, right? You can edit it. Not edible. Paths are not editable. Edible. They're editable. Okay, you can edit them. You don't want to eat paths. That's not good for you, okay? Not a good idea. So that is how you would go about making roads like that. Just pick the texture you want. I choose a white or lighter texture because it pops out against any texture or landmass. Remember that trick. When you're putting down your road, white is a neutral color, so it's going to work on any color except for obviously landmasses up here. As you see this snow right here, it kind of hides a little bit, and that's kind of okay considering the theme. The snow and sand, they kind of are constantly moving. Snow drifts, sand is constantly moving, so the path doesn't have to be quite as visible. Not a big deal. Okay. Yep, absolutely. Path tools are great. Any other questions that people have? Just make sure to group all your paths. Absolutely. You definitely want to group all of your paths because let me tell you something. It's easier to just group them all, lock them, label that group. There is a stream on groups. Make sure you go check out that group video on our YouTube channel. Very, very helpful. We've got like 100+ videos on our YouTube channel. So if you're feeling like you're not knowing how to do something, YouTube channel is a great place to go. And guess what? We've got hundreds of more videos to go. So we're not running out of content anytime soon. Lots of fun streams to come. I'm very, very excited. All right, so I'm going to stop questions right now. We're at the last just several moments of the stream. I'm just going to go ahead and go over the stream calendar. And I'll just go ahead and explain what's coming up next. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this stream. I'll go up, and then we're going to go hit this calendar right here, and I'll show you what's going on for October. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a sec. I'm not seeing it anywhere. Oh, wait. Let me check here. Oh, yep. We got a Q&A going on next week. Let's go ahead and go back to this map so you can see it here. I realize I didn't actually put the calendar on here. My mistake. Next week, we've got next week on Wednesday is going to be the Fantasy World Biomes Part 2. So earlier we did Fantasy Biomes on this map right here. We made some biomes here. And we're going to go ahead and continue going over all the various types of biomes that you can put. There's a lot of different biomes that you can put on a world map. So last time we did Fae and we did a lot of forests and we put down our mountains. So we're going to add more biomes. I'm going to show you how to blend biomes. How is it you would make a snowy biome next to a tundra, next to a deciduous forest, next to a desert, next to a whatever, right? So I'll show you how to be blending biomes in this next kind of installment in this series. Super excited about that because biomes are kind of confusing. So I'll definitely go over biomes. Because this is a fresh new crowd of viewers, because we changed our time, we're going to be doing a Q&A on the following Wednesday. And we're going to be answering whatever questions that you might have. And that's going to be a full-on Q&A hour. Feel free to ask any questions you have. Again, any questions about your account and private information like that, please save those questions for our built-in support, including feature requests and art requests. Please don't do those in the Q&A. The Q&A is specifically about, like, how do I do this on a map? How do I do that? That's going to be specific. The last stream at the end of the month on Wednesday is going to be how to create perspective battle maps. And adding a little bit of perspective to your battle map can make it pop out a little bit more, even though they're not as utilitarian as a pure orthographic top-down battle map. Perspective battle maps are great for, let's say, a boss battle or a one-shot, or they're great for maybe you just want your players to explore that room that has the walls and you want to look at things. So perspective battle maps are extremely useful when there's like an important thing going on in your campaign. So that is what we're going to be covering on the last stream of the month. And I'm excited about all these streams. They're all going to be fun. All right, well, I think that's it. Now, if you've missed this, don't worry, I'll add this to YouTube. That usually takes a couple hours. And next week, I will see you all when we decide how to create Fantasy World biomes. I'm excited, part 2. So much fun. I will see you all there. Please, everyone, stay safe and healthy. I'll see you all real soon next week. Merry map making, and stay safe and healthy, everyone. I'll talk to you later. Thank you, everyone, so much. You've been great.